Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is a webinar for a new program developed by the Risk Management Agency called Turfgrass Value Select. This is a pilot crop insurance program. And I'm Sean Collins. I'm new products coordinator here at the Risk Management Agency. So I'll be your presenter today. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you do have questions as we go through this material, we have a Q&A that you can post your questions to, and we have a team that will be working in the background to try to get those questions answered. First thing, just want to mention a little disclaimer here. This presentation is intended for informational purposes only, and as always, you should refer to the Turfgrass Value Select policy, which is the crop provisions and basic provisions and special provisions for complete information. For those of you who aren't familiar with crop insurance, this is a unique public-private partnership between approved insurance providers and the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation. And the way this works is that crop insurance policies are developed and approved by the Risk Management Agency, and they're sold by private insurance companies and serviced by the agents and loss adjusters that are employed by those insurance companies. The federal government, the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, subsidizes a portion of the producer's premium, but the policies themselves are purchased through private crop insurance agents, and I've listed a agent locator tool link here that's on the Risk Management Agency website. So you can go out there and find a list of agents that will sell this policy. The Turfgrass Value Select program is a new dollar select plan of insurance for turfgrass growers, and it utilizes a value select design. This is a design that was developed for nursery, and it allows producers to choose the amount of coverage that they want based on their risk management needs and the specifics of their operation. This product offers several options, including a shallow loss coverage option and hurricane coverage. Producers' actual sales prices are used in determining indemnities. So your sales records will be the basis for valuing your crop, which is good because those values often vary between different producers. And it offers pre-establishment coverage, which is intended to work similar to a replant type of payment. So we'll get into the specifics on all that as we go through the presentation. Some benefits of the program. It's a familiar delivery. Again, it's developed after Nursery Value Select, using that as a template for this program. However, there are some unique aspects of turfgrass that we had to make some adjustments to make turfgrass work under this program design. It's easy to establish coverage. So that is one of the main benefits of this program. In general, it's a lot easier to establish coverage. You don't have to have or provide an inventory or sales records when you're applying for coverage. In general, there are some exceptions. If you're applying for catastrophic coverage, there's some more requirements. But in general, if you're purchasing buy-up coverage, it's relatively easy to sign up for coverage. It's customizable. The program has a lot of different features that allow you to customize it to fit your specific operation. And producers are allowed to be involved in the loss adjustment process. We don't want to, we don't want crop insurance to dictate how you manage your crop. So this allows flexibility for producers to make decisions based on how they would normally do business. And the loss adjustment process works in conjunction with those decisions. And we'll get into those details as we go through the presentation. So just for starters, I want to talk about what is turfgrass? What are we talking about here? This question has come up a few times. We're not talking about turfgrass or grasses that are grown for seed. We're actually talking about grasses that are forming a uniform, long-lived ground cover that's harvested for sale with the root system intact within a layer of sod. So you may hear this referred to as turfgrass sod or sod. That's what we're talking about here. That's what this insurance program is for. And there's two main divisions of turfgrass. You've got the cool season turfgrass. It's grown in more northern latitudes, planted and harvested annually. And then the warm season turfgrass, grown in more southern latitudes. Typically, these are established vegetatively using rhizomes and stolons. And these can sometimes be harvested several times per year, depending on what area you're in. And then there's a transition zone where both these warm season and cool season grasses can be grown. As far as what's insurable under the turfgrass program, within warm season division, we have 4 types: Bermuda, Centipede, St. Augustine, and Georgia. And then we have 3 insurable cool season types: Kentucky bluegrass, tall fescue, and tall fescue Kentucky bluegrass mix. And this is a map of the pilot area. Again, this is a pilot, so essentially we're testing this program in a limited area initially to make sure that it works as intended before further expanding to additional areas. But assuming that the program does work as intended, there will be opportunities for expansion in the future. So if the program is not currently available in your county and there's significant turfgrass acreage in that county, that there's a possibility that that could be expanded in the future, and we'd like to know about it. So you can reach out to myself or our regional office and let us know that you're interested. We've got regional offices throughout the country. There's one in Raleigh, North Carolina, Oklahoma City, Topeka, Kansas, St. Paul, Minnesota, Springfield, Illinois, that are within these program counties or program states. Initially, we're piloting it in these 10 states that are highlighted here on this map. The counties that are highlighted in red are where the warm season types will be available. The counties that are highlighted in white is the transition zone where all 7 types will be available to insure. And then the counties highlighted in blue are where the cool season types will be insurable. So for the initial rollout of this program, we've got a September 1st sales closing date that's going to be applicable to all those counties that were shown on that previous slide. And anybody in those counties will have an opportunity to purchase coverage on or before the September 1st sales closing date. Going forward, we will have different sales closing dates for Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas. So for the 28 crop year, they're going to have a different sales closing date. It'll be a May 1st sales closing date in those states. So if you purchase coverage and you're in one of those states, for the first crop year, your premium will be prorated for the amount of time left in the insurance period. So it'll be an abbreviated crop year, that first crop year. Now, if you miss that first September 1st sales closing date, don't worry. For new insureds and insureds purchasing coverage for the 2027 crop year, you can purchase coverage at any time after the September 1st sales closing date, and the premium for your policy will be prorated for the remainder of the crop year. Insurance will attach on the 31st day after all the acceptable paperwork is submitted and after the insurance company has had an opportunity to perform an inspection, make sure that meet all the insurability requirements. For renewals, coverage is continuous, so coverage will attach, and there won't be a gap in coverage as long as you submit your acceptable paperwork by the applicable sales closing date. So this table here shows what the sales closing dates and the other insurance dates are for the 2028 and subsequent crop years. So again, for those states in Alabama, those states of Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Texas, they'll all have a May 1st sales closing date for the 2028 crop year. Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, and Oklahoma will continue to have a September 1st sales closing date. So you may be wondering what the program will cost, and we'll talk a little bit about that now, and talk about premium rates in a little bit on down in the presentation. But there's basically 2 main types of coverage that are available. We have what's called catastrophic coverage or CAT coverage, and this is a lower level of coverage, and this type of coverage is fully subsidized. The premium is fully subsidized. So all the insured pays is a $655 administrative fee. If you elect this type of coverage, you have to insure all your types in the county. Policies are on a county by county basis. So they have to be all the types have to be insured under one policy. For buy-up coverage, which is a higher level of coverage, There are separate administrative fees for each turfgrass type. Those fees are only $30. A portion of the premium is subsidized for those types of policies. And you can choose to insure some types and not others. So if there are some types that you grow that you don't want to insure, you don't have to. Each type is considered a separate crop and a separate policy. For insurance, units are the basis for establishing losses, and we only allow one basic unit under turfgrass for each insured crop. So if you have an additional coverage level policy, a buy-up policy, then you can have one basic unit for each type that you elect to insure. There's one exception there is if you have different share arrangements, those basic units can further be divided by share. So in order for turfgrass to be insurable, they must meet these insurability requirements. First, the turfgrass type and variety has to have been sold in one of the last 3 years to be insurable. So you have to have grown and sold the turfgrass in one of the last 3 years. We're only insuring irrigated turfgrass. You must follow good farming practices. So these are practices that are recommended by your local extension specialist. So that's what the insurance companies are going to be looking at if there's any questions about whether you're following good farming practices. They'll be reaching out to the local extension specialist to verify that. Turfgrass has to be grown in an appropriate medium and sold with the root system attached, which is pretty intuitive here for turfgrass. And turfgrass that's damaged prior to insurance attaching is not insurable unless it's recovered fully and it's for sale at the approved sales value. And any damaged turfgrass has got to be, the identity of that's got to be maintained. So we need to be able to track that whenever there's damage to turfgrass. So a map, something like that, to be able to identify areas where there's been previous damage. Okay, so how do you establish coverage? Again, you'll need to talk to a crop insurance agent, and they'll give you a form which is called a Turfgrass Value Report that you'll have to fill out annually. And this is where you're going to select your coverage. And this also includes a monthly unit value plan, or a MUVP. And on this monthly unit value plan, you're going to report your expected monthly values for each month during the crop year. So what do you expect you'll have in your inventory? What's the maximum value you'll have in your inventory for each month during the crop year? So there's not a record requirement to verify this. This is just what you're expecting to have in the future. And on the Turfgrass Value Report, you're going to select the type of coverage you want and the coverage level. So we talked a little bit about catastrophic coverage. You can select that, or you can select buy-up coverage from 50% to 85% coverage levels in 5% increments. You're going to select a value to insure for each unit on your Turfgrass Value Report. So for cat coverage, there is a limit to what you can insure, and that's the lesser of 110% of your prior 3-year maximum value or your maximum value reported on your monthly unit value report. The reason for this limit is because the premium is 100% subsidized for cat coverage. So this is to prevent overinsurance, essentially, when the producer is not paying any premium. But for buy-up coverage, because producer is paying a portion of that premium, we don't have that 110% of the prior 3-year maximum. It's just the maximum monthly value that you report on your monthly unit value report is what your maximum coverage can be. And you don't want to insure more than what you expect to have in your inventory at any time, because your losses are going to be limited to that amount that's in your inventory. And we'll talk about the mechanics of how that all works here in a little bit. Again, coverage is continuous as long as you provide an acceptable Turfgrass Value Report by the sales closing date. And you can certify that there are no material changes from the previous crop year. So if you want to insure the same value and you're expecting to have the same amounts, then you can just certify that, and that streamlines that renewal process a little bit. So there are a couple of optional coverages that are available with the Turfgrass Value Select program. When you elect buy-up coverage, you can also elect an occurrence loss option. And this is the shallow loss coverage that I mentioned. This allows indemnities to be paid sooner and at a higher level when you have shallow losses. There's also a hurricane insurance protection wind index program, or HIPWI as we call it. This is available with buy-up coverage or with cat coverage. It's only available in select counties. These are generally counties where you have a hurricane or tropical storm risk. So these are generally states that are located along the Gulf or Pacific Ocean. One important thing is you cannot have both the occurrence loss option and the HIPWI policy on the same or endorsement on the same policy. There is opportunity to revise your coverage to increase your selected value. So let's say that you have change in your operation and you acquire some additional land, or you have some land that's been fallow that you decide to put into production. You can increase your selected value up to twice per year, and a third time if you have a loss and you replant. So there is an opportunity, if you don't feel like you selected enough coverage, to increase that. Those increases, there is a inspection process and a waiting period of 30 days before that increase will take effect. And those requests have to be submitted in writing by submitting a revised Turfgrass Value Report. It is important to note that you cannot decrease your selected value. It can only be increased during the crop year. The insurance provider has 30 days to perform a pre-acceptance inspection after you submit your Turfgrass Value Report. So if you submit it by the sales closing date, your insurance will attach on the 31st day after the sales closing date, provided that the inspection comes back positive. And inspections can also be performed at any time during the year to determine whether things like good farming practices are followed, you have adequate acreage or equipment. The causes of loss that are insurable under this program are adverse weather. So that includes things like drought, flooding, freeze, wind. It also covers fire, with the caveat that you control control weeds. Wildlife is covered, earthquake, volcanic eruption, insect and disease if there are no effective control measures that exist. Failure of the irrigation is covered if it's due to insured peril, and dead zero market value if also due to insured peril. Some causes of loss that are specifically excluded are the inability to market your turf grass, resulting solely from refusal of a buyer to accept the turf grass, boycott, or orders from a public official, such as quarantine. Those are not covered. There is also an exclusion that if you have a loss due to excess moisture or flood that is not associated with a named storm, if you will not have coverage for future losses due to excess moisture or flood if you don't make improvements to mitigate future losses to these perils. So once this type of mitigation has been performed, the insurance provider will do an inspection upon the insured's request to verify that the improvements are acceptable and to approve the operation for renewed coverage against these perils. If you do have a loss, you have to notify the insurance company within 72 hours of the initial discovery of damage. And claims have to be submitted no later than 60 days after the date of the loss. The time to settle claims can be extended if the approved insurance provider is not able to make an accurate determination of damage. And producers have to obtain consent from the insurance provider before destroying, selling, or otherwise disposing of damaged or dead zero market value turf grass. And that's so that the insurance provider can make an accurate determination of the damage. It's very important that producers maintain appropriate records, because even though these are not going to be in general requested upfront when you're establishing insurance, these are required for loss adjustment. So if you have a loss and you don't have these records, you may not be eligible for an indemnity. So there needs to be an inventory that includes planting dates, related inputs such as seed purchases, and verifiable sales records. These will all be things that can be used in loss adjustment purposes to determine a loss. We do allow technology and remote inspections to be used to verify things like planting dates, damaged harvested acreage. And so if you as a producer have precision agriculture technology that you utilize, that can be acceptable supporting documentation for things like planting dates. As I mentioned, producers participate in determining losses by being able to choose which category damaged plants go into, so our damaged turf grass goes into, and I'll get into that in a few slides here, or the next slide. So we have 4 damage categories. So the turf grass is going to be categorized into one of these 4 categories if there's a loss. First category is undamaged. So that's pretty self-explanatory. It's not damaged, it's not dead or zero market value. The next category is damaged, which is physically damaged, but it's not marketable in its current condition, but it may be rehabilitated. So it could recover and be marketed, but it's also not dead zero market value. So within that damage category, there is 2 subcategories. We have damaged or retained damaged and discarded damaged. And this is where the producer involvement comes in. So the producer can elect to retain damaged turf grass or discard it. And if the producer elects to retain the damaged turf grass and rehabilitate it or put it to another use, you're going to receive a 50% damage factor. It's very important that the identity of the damaged turf grass is maintained, or it will not be insurable going forward. You can receive a second indemnity on damaged turf grass if it is later determined to be dead zero market value, but it's limited to 50% damage factor. So that you can only receive 100% of the value of that turf grass in a single crop year. If the turf grass is discarded, it'll receive a 75% damage factor. And so this is turf grass that's that was not harvested and that you elect not to rehabilitate or retain for another use. And in order to receive an indemnity for this, the turf grass has to be destroyed. The last category is dead zero market value turf grass. And so this is turf grass that's determined to be damaged due to insured cause of loss and exhibits no signs of ability to recover to a marketable quality. This turf grass is considered 100% damaged, and like the discarded damaged, it has to be destroyed before an indemnity can be paid. Okay, now we're going to get into the mechanics of the loss calculations. This is a little bit more in the weeds, but this will help you understand how specifically the losses are determined. There's 2 things that have to be determined first when you're calculating a loss, or when the insurance company is calculating the loss, and that's the pre-loss actual unit value has to be calculated. And essentially this is the sum of the square feet of each variety and stage of turf grass in a unit multiplied by the applicable stage factor times the approved sales value. So this is the value of the crop immediately prior to the loss, essentially. And then the post-loss damage value is essentially that same calculation, except we're multiplying by the damage factor, the applicable damage factor. So once the post-loss damage value and the pre-loss damage actual unit value are determined, you can determine a percent of loss by dividing the post-loss damage value by the pre-loss actual unit value. And from that, we can determine an amount of loss, which is that percent of loss multiplied by the lesser of the pre-loss actual unit value, the value that was immediately prior to the loss, or your selected value, the value that you chose to insure, minus any previous indemnities for the basic unit. So because we're selecting the lesser of those two things, you can never have be paid more than your selected value or your pre-loss actual unit value. You're always limited to the lesser of those two things. And that prevents overinsurance. There's also something that's called an occurrence deductible that we have to determine, and this is your deductible percentage, which is 1 minus your coverage level. So if you have a 75% coverage level that you've selected, your deductible is 25%. So your deductible percentage multiplied by the lesser of your pre-loss actual unit value, or your selected value minus previous indemnities. And then your indemnity is simply your amount of loss minus your occurrence deductible multiplied by your share. And if you have cat coverage, we're going to multiply by 55%, which is essentially reducing that coverage by 55% price election. I mentioned stage factors in some of the calculations, but we haven't talked about that yet. We have 3 different stage factors, and the first stage is a pre-establishment stage. So this is basically after the crop has been planted, or in the case of warm season grasses, if you're regrowing it from ribbons, this would be after the crop is harvested in that situation. But and it goes up into the time that the crop is stage 2, which is your established stage. So if you have damage during this stage 1 pre-establishment stage, this is intended to work like replant coverage, and you'll get 40% of the approved sales value if damage occurs during that time. And if damage occurs during that time, we're also only going to be assigning it either an undamaged or dead zero market value categories. There's no damaged, retained, damaged, discarded categories in that stage. Stage 2 is the established immature stage. So this is after the crop is established, but before it's mature and able to be harvested. If damage occurs at this stage, you receive 75% of the approved sales value. And then stage 3 is the mature stage. And if damage occurs then, it's 100% of the approved sales value. These stages are determined based on the time since they were planted, or in the case of warm season grasses that are being regrown from strips, the time since harvest. And so that's another reason, or one of the main reasons it's important to keep accurate records of your planting dates. So for cool season stages, stage 1 goes from planting up until stage 2. Stage 2 begins 5 weeks after planting, provided that 50% of the stand is established, and it extends up to 25 weeks after planting. And I have 25 weeks bolded here because that's the main difference between the cool season and the warm season, is that 25 weeks. Stage 3 begins from the end of stage 2 to harvest. So again, warm season stages, everything's the same except stage 2 goes through 15 weeks after planting. For pricing, I mentioned that we use the producer's verifiable sales records whenever we're determining the value during a loss. So we're going to use a progressive look back in the event of a loss. So as I mentioned, you have to have grown and sold turfgrass type and variety within the last 3 years for it to be insurable. And you'll have to have sales records within the last 3 years in order to receive an indemnity also. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the 60-day period immediately preceding the date of the insured cause of loss. And so we'll look at your average sales records for that period to determine the value of the type and variety. If there are no sales during that period, we're going to look back at the 12 calendar months preceding the date of loss. If there are no sales within the 12 calendar months, we're going to go back 24 months. And then finally, if there are no sales within the last 24 months, we'll look back 36 months. And again, if you don't have any records within the last 36 months, then you would not be eligible for an indemnity for that particular type and variety. So what are verifiable sales records and what do they have to contain? They have to be sales to a disinterested third party. And they have to contain the name and address of the purchaser, the date of sale, and the complete botanical or common name of the turfgrass variety sold, the number of square feet of each turfgrass variety sold, and the actual price. And we need to be able to net out any discounts for shipping charges as well as other similar amounts that don't relate directly to the value received for the turfgrass. I mentioned briefly the occurrence loss option that is available. This is an option that allows for shallower coverage indemnities. And so the way this works is it triggers whenever your percent of loss exceeds 10%. So once you reach a 10% loss, the program will start paying. Whereas under the regular base policy, you have to exceed your deductible before the program begins paying. So essentially the way this works is it converts the deductible into a copay using a coverage level multiplier. Essentially that coverage level multiplier is applied to each square foot of turfgrass that's lost once you reach that 10% loss threshold. And just like under the base policy, we're going to apply the amount of loss to the lesser of the pre-loss actual unit value or the selected value minus any prior losses within the unit. And this is a depiction of what that indemnity schedule looks like for basic coverage versus the occurrence loss option. The occurrence loss option is depicted on this chart here in blue, and basic coverage is depicted in green. As you can see, once you get to 10% of damage on the x-axis of this chart, the occurrence loss option begins paying, and this is assuming we have the producer selected a 75% coverage level. The green line shows that under the base policy, the indemnities would start being paid out once you get to that 25% loss. And you'll see that these two lines converge, and that convergence point is your selected value or your amount of insurance. So you can never exceed your total amount of selected coverage in those both those options or types of coverage will converge at that point. So getting back to what does this cost? Premium rates for the program are listed in the actuarial documents on the RMA website. They do vary by county. So in order to see exactly what this will cost in your county, you have to go out to the actuarial documents and look up that rate. But regardless of what your rate is, the premium is subsidized. So that the level of subsidy depends on your coverage level. And in general, the higher your coverage level, the lower the subsidy. So if we look at this chart here, if you start out at cat coverage on the left, that's 100% subsidized. And as you move up to higher coverage, up to 85%, the subsidy level decreases. So for example, at the 75% coverage level, the producer premium, 60% of the producer's premium is subsidized. Okay, we're going to walk through a quick example here. This is pretty high level, simple example, but this will give you a flavor for just how the program works. So in this example, this is what a producer's monthly value report might look like. You can see that they've reported different values for each month during the year, with their highest values expected to occur in June or July. And so 1.2 million is the most value that they expect to have in their inventory at any time during the crop year, and that's the maximum amount of coverage that they can select for the crop year. So in this example, we're going to assume that the producer selected the full 1.2 million in coverage, and they selected a 75% coverage level, 100% price selection, and 100% share. So the amount of insurance is that 1.2 million selected value times the 0.75 coverage level times 100% share and price selection. So their amount of insurance is $900,000. So what this producer will pay is we're going to assume that this county that he's in has a 2.5% base rate. Now, this is a rate that is probably pretty average for this program. So some counties are going to be higher than this, some are going to be lower, but this is sort of an average rate. And the producer, again, selected the 75% coverage level. So we're going to take their amount of insurance, which was $900,000, and we are going to multiply that by the 2.5%. So the total premium is $22,500. Then we're going to calculate the subsidy. If you'll remember that subsidy schedule at the 75% coverage level, 60% of the premium is subsidized. So the producer receives $13,500 in subsidy. And so the amount that the producer actually pays is the total premium minus the subsidy. So $9,000 total. this example, we're going to assume that the producer had just one unit. They did not elect the occurrence loss option. They didn't have any previous losses for the crop year. And their approved sales value is 40 cents per square foot. And there was an event that occurred, a flood event. At the time of loss, the producer had 2 million square feet of warm season stage 2 turf grass. 1 million was determined to be dead, zero market value. 750,000 square feet was determined to be damaged. The producer decided that they wanted to retain that turf grass and rehabilitate it. And then 250,000 square feet were determined to be undamaged. So first calculate the pre-loss actual unit value, which is that 2 million square feet times the 0.75 stage factor times the approved sales value. So that comes out to 600,000. So they had roughly half the value in their inventory at the time of loss is the amount of coverage they selected. Then we'll determine the post-loss damage value. So we'll take the 1 million square feet that was determined to be dead and zero market value, multiply that by the 0.75 stage factor and the 1 damage factor for dead zero market value. And we'll add that to the 750,000 square feet that was damaged retained, multiply that by the 0.75 stage factor and the 0.5 damage factor. And then the 250,000 square feet that was undamaged, that gets zeroed out with the 0 damage factor. So those are added up and multiplied by the 40 cents per square foot approved sales value. So the total damage value is 412,500. And then we divide that by the 600,000 pre-loss actual unit value to determine a 0.6875% loss factor. Now we're going to determine the amount of loss. So we'll take that 0.6875% of loss times the lesser of the 600,000 pre-loss actual unit value, or the 1.2 million selected value, minus the previous indemnities. Again, the producer actual pre-loss actual unit value is lower than their selected value, so we're going to use the selected value here. And so the amount of loss is 412,500. We're then going to calculate the occurrence deductible. So we have to apply a deductible, just like with any insurance. So we're going to use the lesser of 150,000, which is the 25% deductible times the pre-loss actual unit value, or 300,000, which is the 25% deductible times 1.2 million selected value. In this case, we're using the 150,000 because it's the lesser of. So that is your occurrence deductible. And the indemnity is the 412,500 amount of loss minus the 150,000 occurrence deductible times the share. So this producer's indemnity comes out to 262,500. And that's all we have for today. That concludes the presentation. Again, I'm Sean Collins. I've got my email listed here. If you have questions or want to reach out, please do so. I also mentioned we have regional offices around the country. Feel free to reach out to your regional offices. You can also coordinate with your grower organizations. And to purchase insurance, you'll again have to go through your crop insurance agent. And crop insurance agent is really your primary source for information on the program. So we encourage you, if you're interested in insurance, use our agent locator tool to find a crop insurance agent and work with your crop insurance agent to determine what coverage works best for you and your operation. Hopefully we're able to get through any questions that were in the Q&A. But if not, again, you can reach out to any of us to ask questions. So thank you for your time today. Have a great day.